Heading into the second core of Darling in the Franxx, I've noticed some expressing a degree of relief that the show is finally moving away from a series of episodes which took on a more relaxed tone and focused more on developing its side characters than the core duo of Zero, Two, and Hero. I felt the urge to respond to this sentiment. As someone who greatly enjoyed the brief period of focus away from the main plot, I think it's important to understand how critical supporting characters are within the story. They play a highly important role in the development of the world, the setting, and frequently the main characters themselves. To ignore the importance of them and their own developmental arcs is to cut short the ability of a story to reach its full potential. In the case of a show like Darling in the Franxx, I can see where some viewers' complaints may be stemming from. The show presented us early on with what would be the core focus. The beginning half of the first core showed us the two key elements that would drive the story forward: the FranXX and the main duo of Zero, Two, and Hero. But in doing so, I think it inadvertently gave some a pinch of disappointment when it changed gears in the later half of the core to work on its supporting characters. We only felt like we got a taste of the action-packed mecha fights and relationship between the main pair, and it created a hunger for more. But I believe this was done intentionally, and when viewed under the broader scope of the series as a whole, I think ultimately it helps rather than it hinders the story. The core's first half served as its own self-contained story arc, with a set beginning, middle, and conclusion, while at the same time acting as an introduction to the series. It let everybody who began watching know what they were getting into in a short but informative prelude. It also gave us some degree of satisfaction by way of it having a pseudo-ending. This then allowed the show to move into a series of more relaxed episodes where the stakes were low enough to give the characters some room to breathe. By organizing the plot progression in this way, the show avoids two less favorable options for telling its story. If it had started the series with this more relaxed tone, it wouldn't have grabbed the attention of as many people. It needed the hook to draw in a sizable viewer base, and the early episodes do so flawlessly. Alternatively, it could have foregone the slower-paced, mellowed-out episodes entirely, and continued to lay on the action and development of the main characters and plot. But this would have been a mistake as well, because Darling in the Franxx is an ensemble show. It relies on its side characters to help provide world-building, plot development, and main character development. Certainly the show could fare without them, but it would be all the weaker for it. It's also worth noting that these episodes allowed for us to see the interactions of Zero, Two, and Hero outside of combat and whatever other stressful main plot events are due to take place in the second core. But that's not the focus of this video. What I want to concentrate on is just one aspect of what made these episodes so important: the supporting cast. So let's examine how much a well-developed supporting cast does for a story. Let's unpack the bullet points that I laid out earlier. First, they provide world building. By shifting the lens of the story to focus on supporting roles, we see how different people interact with the world around them, and more importantly, how the world interacts with them. In a setting as mysterious as this shows, to gain additional points of view is to gain a more complete understanding of the setting. The main pair cannot experience everything because of their own personalities, desires, and actions, which are fundamentally different from those of the people around them. They aren't generic Mary Sues who can experience everything because of their lack of character. They are limited just as real people are. By focusing on a side character who has their own way of acting, the world reacts to them differently than it would anybody else, thus revealing things about the setting in an organic and believable manner. Well-developed supporting cast members can do this. Underdeveloped ones cannot. If the character outside of the main duo were mostly ignored, one would not be able to see how the world reacts to them, because the world does not react to cardboard cutouts who only exist to fill the background. I think the best example of this one could give from Darling in the Franxx is Zorome's solo adventure when he gets separated from the group within the city. Getting lost like that is something that wouldn't really make as much sense for either of the main characters, and it leads into an entire series of world-building moments, all of which occur specifically because it was Zorome who got lost. If the series hadn't taken a break from the main plot and main characters, we never would have gotten to see this development or others like it. Secondly, supporting characters also provide an alternative method to push the plot forward. Certainly a role like that could be filled by main characters throughout the story, but it makes for a much more interesting and varied plot if the driving force behind it is not always the same. Once again, we look to how a well-developed side character can act according to that development in order to better the story. Their unique personal traits allow them to drive the plot in a variety of ways, preventing the story from getting stale by using the same force every time something needs to happen. Now, so far in Darling in the Franxx, I would say the main plot is the relationship between Zero Two and Hiro, which is the third point I outlined earlier. Their relationship is pretty multifaceted, but I think for simplicity's sake we can narrow it down to three aspects. The first is their past history together, which as of now we know very little about, and has been entirely centered around them as a duo with little outside influence, so I'll ignore that part for the sake of staying on topic. The other two aspects of their relationship, however, are very much so involved with and influenced by the actions of the supporting cast. Actions which would be nothing more than plot convenience if these characters had not gotten developed in the second half of the first core. So, what are these two aspects of Zero Two and Hiro's relationship? Well, one of them is the duo as people. That is to say, the relationship outside of their job as FranXX pilots and their shared history. When I talk about their relationship as people, I refer to the romance between them taken on its own. And what has been one of the key foci of the series when it comes to the relationship of Zero Two and Hiro is Ichigo. Ichigo's feelings for Hiro have been prevalent since the start of the series, and in the second half of the core, we get a lot of key context for those feelings. A love triangle may not be the most original way to add drama and tension to a relationship, but it's effective, and it works just as well in Darling in the Franxx as it does anywhere else when every party involved is nuanced and fleshed out. And Zero Two's forward behavior does a lot more than simply shake up Hiro and Ichigo's relationship. It rocks the very foundations of the entire supporting cast's relationships. This wraps back around to world building, as the cast's shock at her behavior informs the viewer just how sheltered from normal human connections these kids are. It tells us about the system that's in place to turn children into mecha pilots and what they lose by being born into this role. Once again, without the series of more slice-of-life oriented episodes, we would have lost key development of the supporting cast, and in this case, lost a lot of what makes the relationships in the show so interesting. As for the final aspect of Zero Two and Hiro's relationship, well, it's the flip side to the previous one, their relationship as partner FranXX pilots. Through this side of their relationship, the first half of the core shows us the struggles that Hiro goes through in order to be able to pilot alongside Zero Two. And my example for how important the supporting cast is to this part of the relationship comes in when we see Goro's concern for Hiro's health, and ultimately his agreement to stay quiet about how much of a toll piloting is taking on Hiro's body. Goro is the ultimate bro. That much is clear right from the start of the series, but it isn't until the second half of the core, when he's given further characterization, that his actions are contextualized and thus carry more weight. Now, if we move outside of the show itself, we can get yet another critical reason that shifting the lens away from the main plot and onto the supporting cast was important. This is simply to make us, the viewers, care about them. Yes, when a series starts, people immediately start picking favorites, but they're doing so based on the surface-level tropes that the characters are introduced as. In order for that care, that empathy, to remain, characters need to move beyond what could be written as a single line. The more we know about a character, the more we care about them. Darling in the Franxx, though focused on Zero Two and Hiro, is an ensemble show. Nobody would waste such vivid and unique character designs on people that aren't supposed to have a lasting impact. They are all interesting and entertaining individuals whose contributions to the plot are just as important as the main duos. Despite the fact that the show switched its attention to the supporting cast for a few episodes, it only strengthened the core plot by doing so. By giving us more information about the world, and some outside perspective to Zero Two and Hiro's relationship, Darling in the Franxx increased the value of the story. It might seem contradictory to say that the plot was deepened by shifting the lens away from the focus of said plot, but that is exactly what Darling in the Franxx did, and it's all the better for it.